We know that there are a lot of characters on Degrassi, that's obvious, so there are many directions that the show could have taken. Certain directions that I would have taken that I think would have explored the characters a little bit more. I think they would have been more interesting. This is an idea I saw in the comments and I thought would be interesting. This will obviously be different because I'll be using my imagination, and I'm gonna really try hard to not have this sound like fan fiction. There are some storylines that I think could have helped the characters more, and that's what I want to talk about. One of the things that I wish that the show had done differently was explored the way Ellie, Marco, and Paige's college experiences were. The storylines aren't particularly that interesting or well thought through, especially Ellie's storyline with Jesse and Craig, and it just becomes sad at points, honestly.
I love you, Ellie.
I love you too.
So don't make me stop.
I would have gone a completely different direction in exploring Ellie's college life. We know that she suffers with self-harm, most likely from anxiety and depression to an extent, and after she graduates, we could see her struggling with college life and struggling with wanting to self-harm. I think it would have been more interesting if Ellie wanted to be a social worker instead of a journalist, because they don't really do anything that interesting with the journalist angle. I think it would also be interesting because Ellie being a social worker, it might hit close to home at certain points. So we could also watch her struggling to want to be a social worker and also trying to find healthy ways to be a social worker in a field where things might trigger her emotionally. I think it would be more interesting to see Ellie wanting to help others in this way, especially after seeing how she took care of her mother. I think it would also make sense for her character to go in this direction. Maybe after going to group, she realized that she also wanted to help others, like in a therapy and community type of way, the way that she has been helped. Since she's a little on the anti-social side, I would like to have her do like an internship at a place that mentors young teens, and she meets a teenager that shares similar experiences to her in some way. Maybe they tend to be self-destructive, closed off, don't really care for the idea of having a mentor, and Ellie isn't too thrilled at being a mentor for this person either, but eventually Ellie would start to learn more and understand this person. Maybe she finds out that this person has an abusive parent at home. I would also pace it out like it's a slow blooming friendship between Ellie and this person she'd be mentoring. We'd also see Ellie grow as she learns to be a better mentor, wanting this person to succeed. Throughout Ellie's journey in college, maybe we could have Ellie learning more about this person while also reflecting where her own life is compared to where she was. We'd also learn more about the teen she'd be mentoring, like some of their good qualities. Maybe they're actually academically smart but don't apply themselves, or are secretly a great artist but lacks the confidence to pursue it. We saw how Ellie really pushed Jimmy to do art, so we know that she has this type of personality that would really push this person to keep pursuing a talent that they have. I think this would really have been an interesting storyline for Ellie, especially because I feel like her character remains very stagnant after season 5, and this would also give us a chance to see how those thoughts of self-harm do return if she's triggered in different environments. I wanted to see her learn more about herself during her adult life in college. It would have been better than what the plot lines were, which were just around guys. So I always found Owen's characterization on the show to be very strange. Like, this fucker assaults Adam, throwing him into a door, and doesn't get expelled, but Fitz does for Vegas night. Very strange that this assault on a trans teen doesn't lead to more serious consequences, but whatever. He starts sexually harassing Anya and then acts like a bitch when Anya doesn't want him.
What's wrong with you? All these girls wish I'd flirt with them.
This boy thinks you want him to harass, grope, and flirt with you. Can I see a show of hands?
Also, the homophobia towards Riley and Zane, his behavior is so bizarre. And then when he's nice to Anya and they have sex, he just expects them to be together. And then he makes a post basically hinting at it being Anya. The girl's name begins with an A and ends with an A. Like, what a fucking creep. His excuse was that he was trying to get her attention, but I don't know, it just comes off as manipulative and creepy. But anyway, the writers added Owen as a main character to the show in season 11, and I have no idea what the fuck they were thinking, if they had no plans on redeeming this character. I mean, I know a lot of you hate Jay. I get it completely, but they at least made him somewhat likable to people and actually showed places where he was a genuinely decent human being. Even though they were few and far between, at least the show does set that up. Owen wants to be similar to Jay, this cool guy, previous bully, but also has a likable personality. Yeah, here's the problem with that. They don't give us enough of Owen that makes him likable, or show parts of his humanity enough that make me want to root for this character or make me even want to like him at all. We may have had one nice moment with Owen and Tristan after giving himself a heart attack when he starves himself, but that's not enough to make Owen a standout character that we can sympathize with. But I do think this could have been the start of something. Maybe seeing his baby brother doing all of this because he feels so insecure with himself could have started to make Owen realize that his behavior towards Tristan, being embarrassed by him, probably ashamed because he knows his brother is gay and he still has problems with that. And there are tiny moments in the show where we know that Owen does care for his brother. I think this could have been the start to a redemption arc for Owen. Maybe some think he's too far gone, but I don't know, I do think there's something there that could have been explored. It could have been a deeper exploration from what they did in Degrassi High with Simpson and his brother who came out as gay. Simpson also has problems with that as well, but eventually learns to accept it. That plotline only has one episode dedicated to it though, so it doesn't really have enough time to explore it in a deeper way. I just always thought it was weird that they never delved into his feelings about his brother being gay, since the show really showed that Owen was really homophobic and transphobic.
The shirt! It's making me totally gay!
How is that funny?
I think Tristan and Owen's dynamic could have been really interesting because Owen's arc of acceptance could have been similar to how Spinner was super homophobic to Marco and learned to be more accepting over time, although that could have been done better as well. So maybe during the events of season 10, Tristan comes out to his parents who are really indifferent to the news of Tristan being gay. They've kind of already set up the grassroots later with Tristan that their parents are kind of absentee type, so their reactions to it would just be that. But Owen is secretly angry about this, and this is where Owen's resentment would start. Even though he knows he can't beat on his brother, he can beat on the others at school like Riley and Zane and Adam. Maybe Tristan found out what Owen did to Adam and is upset and disgusted with him, which only causes more of a distance in their relationship. He hangs out with guys like Fitz who only encourage the behavior. From here we could see that Owen is trying to understand and make more efforts to be nicer to Tristan after what Tristan goes through with giving himself a heart attack, and Tristan notices this and thinks it's weird, but eventually Owen explains how he was really scared in that moment and he thought Tristan was going to die and really regretted not making more of an effort. But like, Owen could be all tough about it because he still doesn't express his feelings really well, but he has good intentions. This isn't as a way to justify Owen's behavior at all. I just think if they were going to add him as a main character and not just have him be this standard bully, they should explore that more then. We could also see Owen trying to make things right with Adam, who maybe is still hesitant to accept his apology, and Owen feels determined to make sure that Adam knows that he is sorry for his behavior in the past, and even talks to Tristan about it. We know that he's mentioned it to Adam in the past, but again, it's only mentioned in passing, not even acknowledged by Owen. Here we'd see how Owen has progressed to talking to his brother about his problems instead of holding it in. Tristan would tell him that it's okay if Adam doesn't forgive him because he can see that Owen is trying and making an effort, and eventually we can see that he does keep at it, and eventually Adam does notice that. I don't know, I just feel like there are places that this character could have gone because he wasn't beyond redemption. I think actually he was a good character to go through a redemption arc because of everything they set up, especially because they introduced his brother who was gay, a problem that Owen really seemed to have a problem with. Such an interesting brother dynamic that they wasted. I forgot to mention this in my last video, but someone smartly reminded me that Tristan also struggled with an eating disorder. Tristan is a really hated character for a lot of reasons.
Last year she had 2 guys fight over her.
What happened?
Nothing.
Dude, seriously.
But it didn't need to be that way. They could have definitely explored this plot line of Tristan struggling with an eating disorder more than once, especially because they do it so briefly. He's already someone prone to influence and wants to be validated. We've seen that before where he really was trying to impress Cam. We saw that where he was trying to impress Mr. Yates. He also lacks self-confidence, and that's clear. Even though he does appear like he does have confidence, he really doesn't. And he's insecure. And like I said before with Owen, they do set up this plot line of Tristan having neglectful parents, especially during the time where he was being groomed by Yates. I believe there was a text on the phone where he asked where his parents were when they were supposed to take him to a doctor's appointment, and his parents were being very absent from his life. And that could have been an interesting way to set up the struggle with his eating disorder. Following Yates being reported reported, we could have also followed Tristan's home life and his worsening relationship with his neglectful parents. I also wish we could have had some interactions with Tristan and his parents, like maybe they find out about what happened with Yates and they're hesitant to believe him, or they blame him in some way because they think that Tristan would be the one that caused trouble. We needed to see some more of Tristan coming to terms with how he was in this inappropriate relationship with this teacher, and maybe once he started to realize that it was never a real relationship like how he wanted it to be, that's really where this struggle with his eating disorder starts. I always hated how the show brushed off this fucked up relationship because they just thought, let's pair up Tristan and Miles, that will help with his trauma. If anything, it doesn't give Tristan any time to take in and cope with what happened. That's just the resolution of being abused by your teacher. Yay, you get a boyfriend, problem solved. So I'm not someone that's against Tristan and Miles. If the characterization of their characters were done better, I would have actually liked the relationship and think that it could have worked. Earlier in season 13, we see the developing friendship between Tristan and Miles. And Thunderstruck could have continued this, but instead of jumping to Tristan and Miles getting together, we could have the reveal of what happened with Yates and Miles lending an ear to Tristan as he works through the realization of the manipulation he's been through. I don't really like the way that it's handled, and I've already mentioned that before. I wouldn't develop their romance just yet, but this would be where the relationship starts to deepen a little bit more because they start to understand each other in a different way. But it's still a good moment for the characters to get closer when Miles sees how choked up Tristan is over Yates. As far as Tristan struggling with an eating disorder, I would probably pace this throughout season 14 in a way where time has gone by, but we can also notice that Tristan is becoming more unhealthy, and especially since he's not really talking to Maya, he feels even more alone. This would also be during the time where Miles would be struggling with what's going on with his father and the abuse of that, but he also notices something different about Tristan and his behavior. He tries to get him to talk, but Tristan blows up at him and tells him to stay out of it. Miles presses more about it until Tristan has an outburst about how his parents don't care or believe him about Yates. His first boyfriend wasn't even real and no one would love him. Miles tells him how it's not true. Again, this would still be a platonic moment for them, but it would reveal how Tristan has become close enough with Miles to be able to reveal something this personal. I think this also helps with Miles' character development, showing how he genuinely cares for Tristan's well-being, and it doesn't come off like him jerking him around. After this, we see that Tristan attempts to talk to his parents again and tell him that he's been struggling with eating again, and this is where they listen to him and he starts going to counseling for this. We'd also see a follow-up on Tristan struggling with food, and maybe Miles also overly worries about him and how he'll react to certain things. We could also see Tristan learning to have a healthier relationship to food. I think Tristan could have been characterized well, but the writers didn't really know how to characterize him. I always wish that Tiny got more plot lines. Any plot lines, if we're being honest, especially since they connected him to Vince. It seems like such a waste of an opportunity, an interesting brother dynamic, again, wasted. Let's remember that Vince has terrorized many characters throughout the show. We know that he's been in and out of prison and that he's the closest thing that Tiny has had to some type of authority. So it baffles me that they never went in the direction of focusing on a follow-up to their relationship, especially after Vince gets arrested again. The next class really missed the opportunity here, but there's a few directions I would have taken it if I had it my way. Starting in the next class, we'd see that Tiny would still be hung up on Vince being arrested. Going to visit him often, we'd also see more of Tiny's relationship with his mother. He'd have to go back and live with her. She's still getting high, but Tiny is persistent in making science his main priority, and things only get worse when his father enters the picture again. However, Tiny thinks that maybe his father's changed when he praises him for doing well in his classes. He's never really done that before. Not used to the praise, he feels a little happier, and his mother even seems to be a little happier now. And this gives Tiny false hope that things will work out for the better. However, he starts to notice subtle behaviors in the father slipping back to his old ways, being in and out, absent, taking his mother's money, and also encouraging his mother to keep using. When Tiny talks to Vince about it, Vince tells him that their father used to take him to sell drugs with them, and one time he left him to get arrested. Tiny realizes that his father will never prioritize him or his mother, and this is when Tiny tries to get his father to leave because he knows it will be worse for her in the long run, but this is where the father would refuse. Then the father would start to be a little bit more abusive, scaring Tiny into silence. Obviously, this would cause further stress to Tiny, and it would start to show in his marks on his tests, and maybe that's when Shay notices that Tiny isn't as invested in science as he was, and his grades are slipping, but Tiny doesn't really seem to care about it. Eventually, he'd end up telling Shay about it, and she'd suggest to go to the guidance counselor, but he would tell her to not do that. But But Shay, of course, who worries for him, tells the guidance counselor anyway, who would have to report the situation to social services. Tiny would blow up at Shay because he would be angry with her for betraying his trust and avoid her for a bit throughout the season. We'd see them slowly make up, and Tiny would learn that Shay was only looking out for his safety. We could also focus on Tiny's life working with a social worker, possibly having to go to a group home for a while since there might not have been anybody to take care of him. I feel like this would have also made Shay a little bit more flawed of a character, feeling the moral dilemma of betraying Tiny's trust in order to keep him safe. I also think that Shay and Tiny's relationship isn't the best developed that it could have been, so this could have added a little bit more depth to that. We could also finally see Tiny dealing with his family situation and realizing that he isn't to blame for his parents or how his brother turned out. I think that this would have been so interesting for Tiny as a character to confront his home life in a more fleshed out way, and also see him work through this and strive to be better. I think it also adds more nuance to the black excellent trope that I was talking about in another video, because it also allows a chance for Tiny to feel more of a realized character. After the episode with Hazel confronting her own internalized racism, they were kind of implying that maybe her and Fizza could have developed a friendship. I feel like a friendship with Fizza could have been explored because it could have given Hazel a friend to bond with that she feels culturally connected to, and it could have given a chance for Fizza to feel more fleshed out as a character too, because I don't know, it just feels like there was something there to be explored, and we already know why Hazel didn't get storylines. But if it were up to me, I'd continue from how that plotline leaves off. It'd be like a few episodes later, some time had passed, but the events of the other episode are still pretty fresh. After Fizza and Hazel get paired up on an assignment together, Hazel feels nervous to work with Fizza, especially since she hasn't really talked to her since then. Hazel talks to Paige about it, who gives her the advice to just work on the assignment and try to avoid the subject. Hazel is still a little hesitant, feeling guilty about before and also embarrassed, and she also still cares about what people think. At first, Hazel takes Paige's advice and they just work on the assignment, but Hazel realizes that she just can't ignore the subject. At this point, Hazel has come to terms with the fact that she can't keep hiding who she is, but sometimes she notices that she does feel isolated among her main friend group. Fizza would then ask Hazel about what her friends thought about what happened with the display, and that's where Hazel would realize that they don't really bring it up or talk about it, and that she probably wouldn't feel comfortable to really talk about it with them. And this is where we could also see a conversation about what happened from Fizza's perspective and how she felt when it happened, like being punched in the gut, the hard work she put in, just being destroyed, people just seeing her as a terrorist. And Hazel apologizes again, this time on the verge of tears, because she realized how much Fizza was hurt by this. I think that this would have been an interesting direction to take Hazel, because it allows us to see how she holds on to things, because she's worried about what others think about her, but because she also maybe doesn't feel comfortable to talk about it with other people. I also like the idea of Hazel continuing to learn from her faults and grow as a person, and I really would have liked to see a Hazel and Fizza friendship, honestly. I've talked about race and the nuances of race representation before, and there is an aspect that I wish was explored, and that's the possible relationship that black girls have to their hair. When I was young, I struggled with self-worth because of my hair texture, and I imagine a lot of young black girls with really kinky hair types also felt this way, especially if they went to schools that might have been mostly white populated. A lot of the black characters on Degrassi don't really have these insecurities with themselves, which I mean, I can't speak for every black person, but I know I felt this insecurity before being black in my life, and I wish that characters on Degrassi were also depicted with feeling isolated because of their race sometimes, because this is a common thing that is felt. That being said, Marisol is a character that never really got storylines outside of her really shallow relationship with Mo, and I wish they focused on her character more. I feel like Marisol would have been a good character to explore this plotline with, especially because of how she presents herself. Again, I don't think that every character on the show that's a person of color has to have plot lines that are about their race. Obviously not all the time, but it does add a new perspective to a character when that part of their identity is explored in an interesting way. Women are always insecure about how they appear to others. It can be an isolating feeling to live somewhere and you are the only one of color. I think this could have been explored for Marisol, like maybe she met Katie and started hanging out with her and her other friends and started straightening her hair more to make it look more like her other friends, and this subject resurfaces when maybe Marisol's mother asks her why she doesn't wear her hair like she used to, and Marisol shrugs it off saying it's easier to style it this way. We learn that Marisol is afraid to wear her hair natural because it's been so long since she's worn it naturally and she's afraid and insecure. When I started started wearing my hair naturally, it also felt very nerve-wracking, so I imagine that other people could also feel this way. I actually had the feeling that people would laugh at me for just having my hair in its natural state. Anyway, maybe she eventually talks to Mo about the situation and she shows her older pictures of herself, and he smiles and says how he wants her to wear her hair the way she wants to. And we can see Marisol slowly taking steps to wearing her hair differently. Like I said, Marisol isn't really a character that gets any exploration, and I think this would have added to the insecurities that maybe she feels around herself. It's clear that there are many routes that the show could have taken for these characters, and the show just didn't. Honestly, I really liked this, and I have to return to this topic because there are so many more characters and storylines that I could come up with, and it was fun to imagine and involve my creative writing into this video. So thank you so much for sticking around until this point. I hope you like some of these ideas I came up with, and I hope to see you in the next one.